Lysa has touched on the notion that women can have it all, that it's possible to juggle a successful career, a social life, hobbies, a family, and anything else you can dream of attaining. Speaking from experience, however, Lysa suggests that this can be an unrealistic and misleading goal, and that compromise between choices is key for everyone.
Yeah, and it's an interesting phrase, because I certainly don't want people to take out that I mean you can't have it all, because I think you can have everything you want to have. And I certainly have it all in terms of the things I would want in my life. I guess where I don't like that phrase is particularly when I was kind of in my early 20s, there was a lot, that phrase was used a lot. And it was a bit of a pastiche for, you can have a career, you can have a family, you can look amazing and be size 8, you can be super fit and run marathons on the weekend, you can have a perfectly clean house that you're doing yourself. You're feeding your family hand-cooked meals that are nutritionally balanced.
Wow.
And I think there was just such a lot of pressure that you had to be doing all those things and perfect at all those things. And I think that's the bit for me that Instagram is replicating. So, I'm a bit of an interior design nerd. I love looking at, I'm just nosy really. So I like looking at house accounts on Instagram.
No problem with that. I do the same.
And they all look perfect and beautiful and showroom like. And then occasionally you'll get someone and go, this is what it looks like when the kids get home from school. Yeah. And I'm like, hallelujah, yay, my house
shoes
looks like
everywhere,
that all the time.
clutter, all the magazines out. Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So I think for me, and a lot of people ask me and say, especially if they're going to go on maternity leave, what should I do? Should I take a year off? Should I give up work? Should I come back part-time? Should I come back full-time? And I always say, you have to choose what's right for you. So for me, I chose to work full-time. So I had my maternity leaves and then went back to work full-time. And that was right for me, but that's not right for everybody. For some people, it may well be taking a few years out or maybe never going back to work. Only you can know what is right.
Can I ask a question on that? And this could be really controversial, but it's just come to my mind. I've always thought this, and I'd be interested to get your view on it. Do you think women are at a disadvantage? Because let's say you're obviously a career woman. You are successful, being successful. If you suddenly decided, and let's say you're 24 years old, you want to have a family, you just said you've got to have time out. You have to, because ultimately you're bearing a child.
Yeah.
Do you think that puts a woman at a disadvantage? Because even if she decides to go back to work full time, she still has to have an element of time off. And do you think that has a negative effect on that lady's career path? Now, I know that's a really controversial question, but it's just, in my opinion, I think it does. I think it's actually almost like an Achilles heel, because you can't change that. But it'd be interesting to get your point of view.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting question. And, it never occurred to me until I was talking with a colleague one day who didn't have children. And we both effectively, we were peers. We did the same level of job.
Okay.
And she said to me, well, you're so much more successful than me. And I said, well, what do you mean? We do the same job? What are you on about?
Right, yeah.
And she said, yeah, but you've taken 4 years off because of maternity leave. So I'm 4 years ahead of you and we're doing the same job. So you must be more successful than me. And I never really thought about it before. And I just thought, yeah, is that perception, because I've taken 4 years off, they're almost 4 missing years.
Yeah.
I think a lot of it comes back to how women treat their maternity leaves. And this is part of what I always talk to people about when they ask me, is you need to think about how you want your maternity leave to be, because it's not one size fits all. So for some people, they want to be 100% focused on their children and not hear from work until they're ready to go back in. And that's fine. But for other people, and I was one of these, I knew I wanted to go back in full time. I didn't want to feel like I'd missed a lot or was out of touch with what was going on in the business. So I had an agreement with the people I was working for as to how I wanted to keep in touch. So I wanted to, if there were big kind of away days, I wanted to be invited. I may choose not to go, but I wanted to have the option to go in and be connected. Once a quarter, I would meet my boss for dinner, just to catch up on what's going on, what's the news, what's the gossip.
So although you weren't there mentally,
yes,
you definitely
I
were.
was checking in. I wasn't there all the time. I definitely wasn't there all the time, but I was checking in.
Sure.
And that meant that when I did go back into the business, I felt like I was still connected. And I didn't spend the first 6 months thinking, oh my, what's
going on? This has all changed. Yeah.
Now that's not for everyone, but I think sometimes, and this might seem sexist, but it's not meant that way, but sometimes male bosses don't quite know how to approach that conversation. And so they think because it's a difficult subject, just keep away from it.
Don't talk about
and
it.
then that doesn't help, because then as a person on maternity leave, you either never hear from your boss, and then you get really suspicious and think, what's going on?
They're getting rid of me.
Yeah,
I'm going to be replaced.
Yeah. Or you hear from them too much and you're like, leave me alone. So I always encourage women to be proactive on that and say, get in the driving seat.
Take some control.
Yeah, to think about the kind of maternity leave you want and talk to your boss about it, because they probably just don't know how to broach it with you. No. Do I think it's a disadvantage? I think it depends on the organisation you work for.
Okay.
So I'm really lucky. I work in a very forward-thinking organisation. We have lots of women that work part-time. We've got a young female-oriented workforce, so lots of people on maternity leave, lots of senior female women. So in our organisation, no, I don't think it does. But I've worked in organisations that are not like that, and I think then in those cases, sadly, yes, it can.
I've got one more question, because I think that a lot of women talk about this actually going back from maternity leave back to business. It must be super stressful period. What advice would you give?
So I would. My advice would be try and ease in gently, having a Friday where you might probably the week before just be getting your child into a nursery perhaps. So you've got a lot of stress around that because that's a change. And then on Monday morning, you're back in the office. So you're giving yourself a pretty short runway to go through a lot of change. So I always advise people to kind of try and think about that, think of it as a transition, because it's a major transition. And I had one of my maternity leaves I had cut short because something had happened at work and they needed me to step into a role, and it was a bit of a crisis situation. Now, I wasn't forced to, I agreed to do that, but still, suddenly I'd got a shorter maternity leave than I thought I had. So I did have to do that quite rapidly. So my advice is always think about the timing, think about the transition, and be a bit kind to yourself and try and ease that in gently. Maybe you've got an option that you could do nursery for one day a week or an afternoon a week in the build up to it, because that can be a mental adjustment as well when your child goes to nursery or a childminder for the first time. There's keep it in touch days where you get paid to work during your maternity leave. So, I think you get 10, certainly in my day, you used to get 10, it might be more now, I don't know. But, think about how you don't have to use all 10, but could you use some of those in the run up just to go back into the office environment and have a cuppa with people, just get a bit used to the commute again. Get some time with your boss to kind of go, how's the business moved on in this time? How's the shape of the department changed? Because sometimes that's
a really good point, because I think if you're not engaged with what you're about to step into, you could almost be anxious about it, couldn't you?
Yeah.
Anxiety levels could go through the roof because you've obviously got a new child going into nursery or whatever it is. You're probably anxious about that. You've then got the fear of, oh my God, I'm going back to work on Monday. I haven't got a clue what I'm going into, what's in store. So very good.
Yeah, and I think, business is so fast moving. If you're taking a year for maternity leave, a lot can change in a year.
Just a bit.
And, it could even be things like technology. I know people that have worked in e-commerce where the website re-platformed to a different platform in the time they're on maternity leave, and suddenly they're coming back and they don't know that platform.
3 years ago, we weren't all using Teams and Zoom.
Exactly. Yeah, I can remember my first Teams calls. Yeah,
and now it's just second nature.
Yeah, use that time to kind of build your confidence, and support network. You can never have a big enough support network.
You're definitely a fan of people.
Yes.
100%.
Yeah. I didn't do this on my own.
No,
absolutely not.